Hello, everyone. This is our non-peer kingdom level jobs roundtable. My name is Warder Rashid Alfana, and I am your host today. So what we're going to do, let me pull up this slide here. What we're going to do is we're going to go over some of the myths and rumors about what it takes to be at a kingdom level position or to aspire to want a kingdom level position. So some of the goals I want to achieve is that's one of them: dispel myths and rumors about kingdom level positions, to encourage non-peers to step up beyond their local level, their barony, their various different levels, college, shire, to create an open dialogue for those that feel left out or kind of pushed aside, and to help grow participation across our kingdom. So here's an overview of the questions. We're going to talk about what your name is, what your current kingdom level position is. If you're a deputy, that's what your level is. What are some of your responsibilities? How did you get that position? Were you a deputy beforehand? So on and so forth. So the key thing is we're going to try to get through these questions here, have everyone answer to the best of their ability. Try to keep your responses, keep them thorough but succinct. So keep them relatively short. If time, time is of the essence here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the slide here, and I'm going to ask the question. And this is open for everybody. Do try to raise your hand if you want to answer the question. But basically, I'm just going to say anyone that has a kingdom level position, I'm going to ask you what your name is and what your current kingdom level position is and what are your responsibilities. So with that said, I'm going to back out of that slide for a second, and we're going to pull this up real quick. Go out of screen share. All right. So, what is your SCA name? What is your current kingdom level position? And what are those responsibilities? Who would like to take that question?
Rashid, this is Maggie. Before we get started, I love what you've put together. I just thought I would ask Their Majesties. I know this is a particular passion of theirs to get people encouraged to participate at a local, regional, kingdom level. Was there anything that you didn't see there that you'd like to hear from your officers, or anything else that you'd like to touch on at all today? I just want to make sure we respect that since you guys are so passionate about it.
Did you want to go first?
Go ahead.
I think mostly today, probably what will happen, unless we're asked a question directly, we'll listen to, because it's really going to be interesting to hear people's perception of what goes into this, and then we can give a lot of correction, because based on some of the things that we've seen leading up to this, there's just a lot of misinformation that's out there, and the misperception is, it's huge. It's huge. So, with that said, we can wait and we'll listen. And, if things get too wild off into the weeds, we may, raise our hand and step in and say, no, we're wasting a lot of time on something that really is not an issue, and move forward. But remember this, just because that this is our opinion of what makes a Curia member or makes somebody qualified to hold a regional or kingdom level office, doesn't necessarily mean that's the same for every set of royalty. We all have different experiences mundanely and within the SCA, and those will lead you to different paths. So
there's a roundtable today on kingdom level offices.
Thank you, Your Majesties. Sorry, Rashid, I just wanted to make sure we heard. I felt like you'd covered everything, but I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. So going back to the slide here, it's not a big deal. We'll go back to it real quick. There we are. So we're going to go ahead. I think I saw the Cardoin. Did you raise your hand? I think so. We're going to go over, what your name is, what your current kingdom level position is, and what are the responsibilities for that. So let's go ahead and open the floor for you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am Caradwyn Vercherwood. I am the Kingdom Seneschal for the Middle Kingdom. That entails being for the corporate office, the Regional Vice President of Operations. That is also an official title, one that I get paid $0 for. So, breaking in the big cash doing this job. By Kingdom law, I am also the legal representative of the Middle Kingdom should anything happen or occur. Hopefully not, but just in case, that is part of the Kingdom Seneschal duties as well. The position is a highly administrative one. It involves good organization. I'm in charge of dealing with any and all complaints in regards to bullying and harassment and the core values of the SCA. I'm in charge of the Kingdom events and bids for those locations, for all of the borders and of each of our regional organizations. The cartographer comes and deals and reports up into my office. So we deal with all of those issues. I have the Kingdom Society or the Kingdom social media officer who reports to me to handle social media and media relations, which is another office. I have the youth that reports up into my office, so deal a lot with youth activities and trying to keep our youth engaged and the excitement involved with that. I now have a deputy for equity and inclusion, so that we're able to help spread those great core values in the society. I have several regionals that help with all of these jobs and duties, and I know I am missing actually several more of the things that I do. But there's a lot that the Kingdom Seneschal does and is responsible for. If you have specific questions, I'm very happy to answer those, but it is a many different directions because we deal with all of the different the transitions and into a certain aspect, if the Crown is willing, you also help act as an advisor to the Crown because a lot of what I do is the administrative, not so fun stuff, and sometimes we get to poke at the Crown and remind them, hey, we got this. So I like to keep them on their toes. I run the Curia meetings and prepare the agendas and ensure that my secretary does a great job in providing the notes for me, and deal with a great husband who is very willing to support me in all of the many running arounds and things that I do, because I guarantee you, if you don't have some good support, it is a really, really hard job to do. So make sure you got a good support system.
All right, who'd like to take the question next? Oh, there we go.
I'll take it. So, hello, I am Sarai Tyndall Soliano in the SCA. I am a member of the Order of the Laurel, and I am the Mid-Realm Kingdom Minister of Arts and Sciences. This means that I oversee all of the local group MOASs, as well as the official Kingdom Arts and Science competitions. I assist people with research. I help local folks sort out how to provide ANS activities to their group if they need it. Yeah, I do a lot of different things. I have a lot of deputies, and that's something I definitely want to get into with like one of your later questions, Rashid, is I have a lot of deputies. So that's a little bit about me and that position.
Okay, yeah, I saw another hand go up. Where was that? All right, oh, there we go. All right, so unmute. And you go ahead and speak. Thank you.
Hi, I am Matressa Zbeta-Michalik. I am the Dragon Herald for the Middle Kingdom. And mainly what that involves is just being or how I see it is, I remove barriers from for my deputies. I support them. If we were doing in Kingdom or in-person events, I would be the main herald for the key events, the coronations, crown tournaments, and that sort of thing. But basically, I see my role as a support for my deputies, because they're really the ones that do the heavy lifting. And again, we'll get into that. One thing I did want to bring up, though, for those of us who are the great officers of state, we have the additional requirement that we sit on curia, and that means that we have the responsibility to advise the crown. And all of our kings and queens, the present company included, are very skilled at wielding the authority of the crown. And so it can be very intimidating to push back against that. So if you are considering a kingdom level position, or specifically one of the great offices of state, be aware that you are going to be expected to be the advisor to the crown, represent the kingdom in everything that you're doing, because that it's not just being the top herald, the top exchequer, the top minister of arts and sciences, et cetera, et cetera. It's taking on that additional role of being the advisor to the crown.
All right, thank you so much. Looks like the Royal Majesties have raised their hand. Go ahead, please.
So I wanted to back up for a second. You know, Maggie was kind enough to open the floor for us, but obviously I didn't set the table correctly. I was just listening to our wonderful Curia members speak a little bit, and they really haven't told you what they do. And the reality of the situation is this. Let's talk about how Curia works. So because people have a misunderstanding what Curia is and what it does. So first and foremost, anything game side, anything SCA side, not legal side, the Crown has the final say. In fact, they have the only say, okay, with the exception of when it comes to spending money. Then there's a financial committee. The Crown cannot just spend money willy-nilly. Many of the people that have spoke are on that financial committee, and they all have a vote. So there is a check and a balance against the Crown. The Crown selects these officers. People make recommendations, but the Crown decides. Okay, the Crown decides on regionals. The Crown decides on deputies. These are all officers of the Crown. So they are there to advise. Now, a good Crown will listen to people, and they will allow the members of Curia to challenge them. We've had Crowns in the past that don't deal with being challenged privately in a good way. You know, and a Crown should be able to hear advice, because a Crown shouldn't be doing, you know, their own personal will. And that's the role of Curia, is to give good advice. It's like, are you sure you want to do this, Your Majesty? Are you really sure you want to do this? Here's the consequences of this if you do these things. So I just wanted everybody to understand how Curia actually works. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Elzbieta and Sarai, everybody's kind of mentioned that, yeah, you have to be ready to speak something that you know that we might not want to hear. And that's very, very difficult for some people. And with us, I would like to think that we take that advice, we listen to it, and don't have an adverse reaction to it. But you have to be prepared to back that particular opinion and advice that you are giving to the Crown. And so that's a really neat thing for people to work on, because communication skills, especially of that nature, are really difficult, but they're so important just across everything. So it's a great opportunity to be able to work on that in this particular environment, but do be prepared to do it.
Correct. I was going to say something. Oh, we don't always agree, and that's okay. That's okay. And that's it's really good. Everything that I've seen in the 3 reigns that we've had is Curia's worked really well. Nobody takes a disagreement personal just because someone has an idea or wants to put something forward. They might not agree with that, but everyone I've seen has really gotten along really well and not take it personal. And, you know, recently I gave ground on something that I did not agree with. I gave in on it. I was adamantly opposed to it, but the officers were like, you kind of really need to do this. And I was like, well, I hate it like poison, but we're going to do it. And we've been on the other side of it. The officers have said, we're not going to do this, or we should do this. And we said, we're going to do this because we think it's best for the kingdom. Now, time will tell, but you know, it's give and take. And so I wanted everyone to understand how Curia works before we continue into this, because a lot of people might not understand about, you know, what really happens behind closed doors.
Just as we have the responsibility for the decisions we make, the members of our Curia, our Kingdom officers, have the responsibility for the decisions they are bringing forward and making as well.
So we'll be quiet now and move on.
Thank you so much for Your Majesties. I really appreciate it. So next person, who wants to go next? Oh, Maggie?
So I'm Maggie McKeith. I'm a member of the Order of the Pelican, and until recently, before the COVID, I was the Kingdom Media Liaison. So I was a deputy to the Kingdom Seneschal, and I took that position from Catalina, and she had held it for a while. She was also the Kingdom Silent Herald, and I believe that was right when she was stepping up to be the Kingdom Exchequer. So it was a feast or famine role. So I'm sure Caradwin would say that as Seneschal, she's busy all the time. There's always something happening. Same for Sarai, same for Elsbetta. I'm sure that their jobs are hopping. As the Kingdom Media Liaison, there were months where I had nothing to do. Nothing happened. There were no crazy news stories. I set up Google alerts to look for them, and they weren't there. And then there were times when it was absolutely crazy busy. We had a guy in the Cleveland area who would put on Templar armor and walk around and interfere with protests, and, you know, identified himself as being part of our group. So that was great for us for a while. And then we had a tragedy within the kingdom, some of you may remember, where the Society Equestrian Marshal lost his life at an event in the Mid-Realm. And that was the most horrific thing I ever had to deal with in that office. I worked a lot with our then Kingdom Seneschal. I worked a lot with the Society, with John the Bear Killer. Is he Society President, Caradwin, or is he this? Yeah. And then I actually had to talk to, you know, reporters from all over, like all over. And that, it was a little nerve-wracking. It was very upsetting, obviously, for everyone involved. So that was probably the scariest thing I ever did in that office. But other than that, it was actually a pretty quiet, fairly fun job. I would help people if someone said, oh, we've got a newspaper that's coming to our event. What do I do? How do I talk to them? What should I say? What should I not say? So it was kind of interesting and fun in that way. So that's what I did as the Kingdom Media Liaison.
Thank you, Maggie. All right, I'd like to hear from the Exchequer.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Sorry, I have a new microphone. Good or no? Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Ilis the Stone. I am probably the youngest, if you will, Kingdom officer at this moment, because I have officially reached my 5-month anniversary in the position. So yeah, what a time to become a Kingdom officer in the middle of a pandemic. So Exchequer. Exchequer is the treasurer for the group. In this case, for the Kingdom group, I oversee 76 of the groups all over the kingdom at the end of the year. utilizing then the 5 regional deputies to help me like organize all of the monthly reporting. I am then in charge of our kingdom accounts that, you know, deal with our various expenditures. And then I report to the society exchequer each month to, you know, reconcile our bank statements and here's what we've spent, here's what we're spending, that kind of things. Obviously, I'm a member of the finance committee because I'm the treasurer, but as we've said before, you know, it's a group effort, and, you know, people bring items forward to talk about to what are their benefits, what can we do with them, and that's kind of where I can put in like a money wise eye on it. Oh, well, this spent, you know, it's just like when you're balancing a checkbook or creating a budget, you know, in your real life. Can we afford it? Is it a good purchase? You know, that kind of stuff is the things that I see as my role. Obviously, as a newer person, there's a lot of things that I'm kind of getting into that, you know, you kind of get into as you get into the role. That was just very redundant, sorry. So I'm trying to think of anything that's really, really pertinent. Obviously, we advise the Crown. I think Elsbetta put it best that we are there to advise the Crown, but the Crown leads us, and we're here to help them in the best interest of the kingdom in our various lanes of offices. And it can be overwhelming. I find it overwhelming now, but I think it's a really neat opportunity to see what the SCA does as a whole and how all of those pieces work together. So, and, you know, I've gone up the ranks, if you will, from I've been at a local, a regional, and now to the kingdom position. So you see how each of those cogs works with one another to make this great machine work. And, you know, that's what I have found the most, you know, part of this. So I guess that's all I have to say about that for right now anyway.
Right. I'd like to hear from the Kingdom Minister of the Youth.
Hello, I'm Artemisia Valterra. I am Kingdom Minister of Youth, and I am in charge of everything non-martial to do with the youth. I am a deputy to the Kingdom Seneschal. So I'm over the different regionals and local and at-large minister or youth officers. I try to help them with different activities or giving them ideas for different things that they can do, ways to find different teachers and stuff that they can do with the youth. I assist the background check deputy whenever they need help. And then we also have the page school dean, which I will help with as well. And pretty much anything else that the Kingdom Seneschal needs. But that's a general overview.
Okay, and Snowden, would you like to go next?
Sure. I am Bronwyn Snowden. I am Kingdom Deputy to the Exchequer. I take care of all the online payments for events that anybody wants to attend through PayPal, and soon, hopefully, the SCARS system that is run through the SCA.org website. I took over from a non-peer with a few months of training, and just as my role got going, we then entered into a pandemic, so events have been shut down. So it's not been extremely active. I am one of the deputies for the Exchequer that isn't needed during her gathering of data because mine is exclusively PayPal. And that's really all that I have to take care of.
All right, and maybe someone from the Marshaled, Sir Ustad?
Sure. Sir Ustad, I am the Kingdom Deputy Experimental Weapons Marshal. I am outgoing, so this will be my last month doing that. And Sir Rolf will be taking over that position for me. And a lot of people haven't really heard of the position. It's been around for quite a while, but it doesn't. You don't hear much about it until you have a new weapon that we are able to use. Basically, the experimental weapons marshal finds a need for advancement of weapons or weapon styles and rattan weapons. Yeah, but it's not just rattan weapons. It's basically every discipline of the marshalate should report to the for an experiment. They should, if they're doing an experiment, they should report to the experimental marshal, who reports to the Kingdom Earl Marshal. But basically, if there's a need to do an advancement or to progress forward with a weapon style, new weapon style, or change an existing weapon style, that's what the experimental weapons marshal does. Basically, we just go through and make sure that if we need to change something, that it's going through, and we run several experiments to make sure it's safe, make sure it can be put together correctly, and that there's no danger in our sport, whatever discipline it happens to be.
All right, thank you so much. And do we have the Knights Marshal here? No, don't see him. Who would like to go next? All right, it looks like we have Andreas. Go ahead.
Hello. I am Andreas Blackwood, Pelican, and I am currently, I hold two offices for the Kingdom. I'm the Vice Chancellor for the RUM, and I'm the Clerk of Precedence. And as Clerk of Precedence, my job is basically to ensure that the Order of Precedence is properly managed, that courts are processed into the OP when a court happens and an award is given. After the court's over, there's a court report that gets sent, and then several weeks later, that report gets processed into the Order of Precedence so that people can go look at their information on midrub.org in their populous record and see that their awards have been there. I also help input missing awards or awards from other kingdoms if you move in from out of kingdom. One of the more esoteric duties of the Clerk of Precedence that doesn't often get brought up anymore is the Clerk of Precedence is supposed to provide Their Majesties with a printed copy of the Order of Precedence at every Crown tournament, and to validate to Their Majesties that the Order of Precedence is correct, which is impossible, so we don't do it anymore. Or at least I have not yet been asked to do it by any of Their Majesties to this point. We'll have to see what happens at the next Crown tournament. As Vice Chancellor of the RUM, usually that job is involved in assisting with the 2 or 3 RUM events that happen every year, with facilitating classes and helping with the scheduling, and generally being a backup to the Chancellor of the RUM in case anything, in case the Chancellor is unable to fulfill duties. I help to process the degrees for the RUM. We've entered a new degree program. However, since about March, the RUM has become a far more active arm of the Kingdom. We run classes. At one point, we were running classes every day. Sometimes we had 2 classes every day, virtually online, for for people to participate in when we went into quarantine. We have since pulled that back a little bit. We're having classes 4 days a week, Sundays through Wednesday, in what we're calling terms, which are 4 weeks to 6 weeks of a theme or something like that, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll have another set of classes. I believe we're currently scheduled for the next several months, and we also edit all of those videos and upload most of them to the RUM YouTube channel. So in the time since that started, we've hosted about 100 some classes, I think, Sarai, and there are, I think, almost 500 subscribers on the Mid-RUM RUM YouTube channel. We've had 2,000 views. It's definitely something that has been very fulfilling to be part of, because it's a lot of people have been participating in it. So those are the two kingdom level roles that I hold.
All right, thank you so much, Andreas. All right, so who would like to go next as far as anyone holding a kingdom level position? Crickets. All right, well, I
think Bridget's the only one that hasn't gone yet.
Oh,
Make her introduce herself.
Yes, Lady Bridget, would you please go next, please?
Yeah, I am Brigid of Red Spears. I am the Kingdom Web Minister, and basically that means I maintain the Kingdom's technology stack from the website to the Google accounts, the Google Admin Console, and all of its services and services portal, and the Heroku instance and the associated applications with that.
All right, and Isabel, clerk of the roster.
Hi, I'm Lady Isabel Taylor, clerk of the roster. I am a direct deputy to the Kingdom Earl Marshal.
Looks like, let's see. Did I miss anyone here? Maybe.
I don't think so. Oh, there you
What's
are,
that?
Isabel. You cut out there.
Oh, could you not hear me?
No.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I stepped outside. My house is kind of crazy. My daughter just got home from school a little while ago. So anyway,
okay.
My main responsibility is to work on the Marshall database, accept initial authorizations, and get those recorded in, make any changes if there's a problem. And also lately been collecting waivers for everyone in all fighters in the kingdom, everyone in the database, which has been quite a challenge. So this year has been busier than others. My position is unique in that it's not just a 2-year term. My immediate predecessor was in office for about 4.5 years till she became the queen. And before her, Bobby was in the office for 5 years. So I was the deputy for 4 years, and this is my 2nd year as the clerk of the roster. So on top of that, we also work as MOLs at Penzic. So we help run Inspection Point, and we serve as MOLs, check everybody and make sure everything's okay. And at kingdom level, if there's any problems with an authorization, we find a way to fix it so our fighters can get out on the field. So pretty much at Penzic, I work about a 40-hour week, every week.
Wow.
That's all there is for me.
I appreciate your work. I appreciate everyone's work here. All right. And did we miss anyone else that has a kingdom level position? I think. Oh, there we go. One right there.
Has it been worth watching?
Right now, it's just been introductions. They haven't gotten into the nitty.
Hey, Elfwin, you're unmuted.
I just muted him. Marshall, is that all the officers that you wanted to cover?
The youth minister's on.
Yep, we have the youth minister.
Oh, so you want to unmute yourself and give a little?
Sure. Well, I'm not the Kingdom Youth Minister yet. I will be on the 17th.
Got it.
But Artemisia's here too. She's current.
Okay.
Yep, she introduced herself already. So
I
let's see
just
here.
joined. We had internet issues. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
That's okay.
Marshall, I thought it might be interesting for everybody who's on who either was or is a Kingdom officer or deputy. If you were not a peer when you took the office, raise your hand.
Oh, wow.
So I just wanted to call that out because I know one of the things that people question and are concerned about is you have to be a peer to be in office. There's lots of hands in case you didn't have the gallery view going there. There was lots of people who had their hands up, myself included,
And
who
that,
were.
That definitely leads into the next question. Is it important to be a peer when applying for a Kingdom level job? It seems like with the hands that are raised, that may have answered our question. But well, looks like we have Gwyneth. She has her hand raised, and let's see here.
All right,
And
so I'll go ahead real quick. When I was, before I became a peer, I was the regional minister of arts for the Oakland region, and that meant both North and South Oakland, and this was in the mid-90s. And my responsibility was to be the eyes and ears resource for the region and know more about the region than my kingdom officer, Mistress Alexis, who was the kingdom MOA at the time. And basically, I was her eyes and ears. I was the resource for the region. I met with my locals. Every event I went to in the Oakland region, I had meetings. And I also ran the regional ANS fair with my counterpart at the time, who was the regional minister of sciences, because at that time we had split. The offices weren't merged yet. So that was my experience when I was not yet a peer. And I held that job for 2 years. And after I stepped down, then I became a peer. But I felt it was a good experience to get the kingdom experience, the kingdom breadth of the experience, operationally, as well as socially and politically as well, to get to know the ins and outs of the kingdom, to be not just a regional officer, but a kingdom deputy. And sometimes I had to speak with the authority of the Kingdom Minister of Arts when she was not present. So there are times when I sat on Curia on her behalf when she couldn't be there, be her representative for anything where she couldn't be. I had to be her and had her authority to enact any actions that she deemed appropriate for the incident or concern at the time. But I was in constant communication with her as well. That was my experience as a regional officer.
all right. Looks like we had another join here not too long ago. Darius.
Hello.
Hello. So what we're doing is we're just asking, what your full name is, what your position is, which I know what it is, but everyone here may not. And also, what are some of your responsibilities? So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for putting this together. I'm Darius Lowen. I'm the 12th Master of Defense of the Middle Kingdom, and I am the current Kingdom Rapier Marshal. My responsibilities are to facilitate swords and sword-like activities and try to keep people from puncturing themselves and others. So mostly I get to, well, the last chunk of time, not a whole lot of anything other than writing the new rule set. I shouldn't even say writing. Adding some commentary to the society-based rule set to prepare for when we eventually get to relaunch activities. I get to oversee a great community of a couple hundred of fencers that are honestly low drag for the most part. While it is my responsibility to oversee marshals and all the rapier activities, it's a really great community that mostly keeps after themselves, so I don't have to step in too often. Have a great group of regionals and deputies that support me in all of those activities. One of the biggest things that causes the most headaches is Penzic, honestly. But if I am not sure how far everybody else is going into this talk track, so I can touch point on that later. But Penzic is one of the biggest, oddest parts of our responsibility. Even though it's only a week or two a year, it causes the most headaches and time and phone calls and chaos. The rest of it's pretty easy.
Well, thank you so much. So I'm going to open this question up. I think we covered almost everyone here. If I didn't, please speak up. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm Amanita Villarosa. I have been deputy KRM 3 times. I am currently a deputy. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. Anything else? I just came in, so anything else I need to say?
Nope, that's going to be fine for now. I'm going to move on to the next question. All right. So we kind of already touched on this. Is it important when applying for a kingdom level job to be a peer? Anyone can answer this. Try raise your hands if you'd like to. Oh, looks like we do have a hand raised. Go ahead, Lady Bridget. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer this one. I know for at least my position, and I don't know if this would apply for all the others, but for mine, I think that having a peerage title is not super important. I mean, my title's lady, so I'm a little biased in that regard. But the position of the web minister is a very technically oriented position, and so the skills needed for it, you don't necessarily grow in the SCA. You don't learn them in the SCA, and there's no peerage for being able to program good. So I think this is probably, I feel this is one of the more accessible positions for non-peers because you don't, sorry, the reverb caused me to lose my train of thought, because the skills you need are something that you can develop outside of the SCA, and that's typically where they come from. For me, I'm mundanely, I'm a pro developer, I'm a senior developer at a IT company, and so I was able to bring those skills in rather than a title.
All right, care to win?
Unmuted. So I don't think a peerage is a necessity for any of the kingdom offices. We have in Curia several kingdom officers that sit in Curia that are not peers. That doesn't stop us. The big ability is to be able to express your opinion and to be able to do the job. While I did come in as a peer, I'm a Laurel for costume making and sumptuary laws. I don't do a whole lot of either one of those as Kingdom Seneschal. What I do is what my mundane background is that becomes useful. The fact that I'm an attorney in real life helps the fact that I can go through and look at the laws and help provide guidance on policy. That I've gotten used to being able to do public speaking, and I've done that both through my job, but also through other positions that aren't even officer positions. I was a baroness for 5 years for my barony. You get the ability to speak, and I think the biggest thing, at least for Kingdom Seneschal job, that is useful on top of organization is the fact that the ability to talk to people, to know different people, to be familiar with it. I certainly got a chance to really get to know different people throughout the kingdom by traveling as a landed baroness. My path is probably not the most traditional compared to the rest of my friends because I did not hold a deputy position. The last time I was seneschal was when I first started in '97. But I have other unique skills that I can bring. I know a lot of the background. I've worked with royalty before, and how to interact with them and be respectful that they are ultimately the word. But then again, part of my job is to point out to them, hey, the law says this, the policies say this. We need to deal with these things. And while, and if they don't like it, then I need to tell them they need to change the law and when they can and when they can't. And that's, again, part of that is that ability to be respectful while sometimes having to say no, or finding a good workaround and being cooperative and helpful in doing it, not being a barrier to the process. And that's a whole lot of what the Kingdom Seneschal job does anyways, is liaison between the corporate office and home and all that. So I don't think it's a necessity. I think it's a lot of people that have become peers have learned those skills. So they may have that extra leg up because they have the peerage, and so they're known by people. They're known to exhibit some of those skills that have led to their peerage, but the peerage is not an absolute requirement. And in my case, the peerage doesn't even influence what it is that I do. So I just say it's really not a necessity to apply, and certainly don't ever let that hold you back from applying from an office.
All right, I saw that Ustad had his hand raised, and then we're going to move to Marcus after this.
Excuse me. Being my job is a deputy to the Kingdom Earl Marshal. So for most of the Kingdom jobs that we have, especially deputy jobs, it's not necessary to be a peer. I think what ends up happening half the time is that peers being who we are and what we look at through our society, we have a tendency to see a need for something and tend to jump into it. And I'm not sure about the actual KEM position, if that has to be a night marshal or not, but I think very few positions actually have to be a peer. It's just we see that need, so you see a lot of peers jumping into those positions.
Thank you so much. All right, Marcus, go ahead, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sir Marcus. I am currently the Deputy Kingdom Earl Marshal underneath Duke Uller, who is currently the Kingdom Earl Marshal. He is coming to the end of his term, and I will be stepping up as KEM later this month. So it's pretty impending. Basically, to answer the direct question, which I'm told is, do you need to be a peer to hold a kingdom office? I think the real answer is that it depends on which kingdom office. I'm going to be real honest and say that the Kingdom Earl Marshal position is probably always going to be held by a peer. Whether that is always and forever an armored combatant peer, I have no idea what the future will hold. It always has been so far. But I believe that particular kingdom office is and should be held by a peer. Now, that said, there are a lot of deputies to the Kingdom Earl Marshal, and a lot of regionals, and I do believe that peers and non-peers can and should hold those deputy positions. There's obviously a DKEM for each marshal activity, and those are, they're direct reports to the KEM, and they oversee, what's going on with an entire martial activity like hound coursing or equestrian or armored combat or rapier, etc. But I believe that is a service position that can absolutely be done very, very well by a non-peer. You do not need to be a peer to hold one of those. There's also special deputy positions, some of which are, again, kind of always going to be peers, and some of which absolutely could be held by a non-peer. I think probably an example of that is the experimental weapons deputy. It's currently held by a peer. His replacement's a peer, but does it need to be a peer? No. And the moral of the story with this, and then I'll stop talking, is if you are interested in something, talk to people. Don't be afraid to reach out. To be frank, that's how I got into the marshalate. I talked to people because I was interested in what was going on over there with these marshals, and that started me down the path. I volunteered to be a regional. That's how I became a regional. I volunteered to be a deputy to Uller. That's how I started training under him, and if I hadn't taken that step of saying, I'm interested in doing this, I want to develop this skill set, I would not be becoming the KEM right now. So at the end of the day, if you're interested in doing something, put yourself out there, go try to do it, whether you're a peer or not. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sir Marcus. All right, it looks like our Kingdom ANS officer has her hand raised. Go ahead, please.
So just sort of to build off of what Marcus just was talking about, how I ended up in, yes, I am a peer. I had been a peer for about 3 months when I stepped up as KMOS. But how I got here is very, very much through, I raised my hand, I said, hey, I'm interested in learning not just this one job, but this other job as well. So I volunteered as a baronial MOAS, as a regional MOAS, as part of the crew that runs the ANS fairs, because that is a reasonably sized crew that people don't actually realize. There's about 8 people that are just part of that. And at any given time, at least 50% of them are at every single fair. It is a ton of travel because it's 5 weekends where you're going who knows where. But it is a great way to really learn how the ANS system works. You've got to learn, you've got to show initiative and show interest, I think, really on any of our jobs, especially if you want to be on Curia eventually. You've got to show initiative and interest at the lower levels first, and just keep building your skill set, keep building your knowledge, show interest. And even if you are not a peer, you apply for those jobs. Here's the thing, the worst they can say is no, and more likely they're going to say, so hey, how about you take this deputy position that I really need filled? And maybe it's not that interesting, but it'll give you an interesting insight to this job and what else you can do with this job and the other expansions of this job. And I think that's the best thing that non-peers can do for themselves when they're trying to build themselves up that ladder to a kingdom position. It's what I did. So I'm probably biased that way, but it sounds like I'm not the only person, because it sounds like that was more or less Marcus's track as well.
Thank you so much. Looks like I have another person that would like to go. Actually, Maggie, not Maggie McKeith. Maggie, you're going to be taking over for, looks like you're going to be the first deputy for, what was that? I'm sorry, I'm missing part of that. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. On mute. There we go.
All right. I'm Maggie O'Donnell. I am just stepping up as the first deputy for the Kingdom Seneschal. So I just recently was granted permission by Dame Karen, when I believe she's going by Dame, to be her deputy. So I have been on the Seneschal track, so it's just kind of like a natural progression for me. I've always been really interested in the organizational side of the SCA in terms of corpora and the laws and you know, the charters, ins and outs, stuff like that. I have a lot of leadership type training from my mundane job. I dispatch for a critical care transport company. So on a typical day, I am juggling patient transports for 4 different companies in Ohio and Indiana. And at any given time, I probably have anywhere from 3 to 20 vehicles out at a time that I'm coordinating. So I started out as a local seneschal several years ago in my local shire. I then stepped up as the baronial seneschal. I took a break for a while from the seneschalate, did some other stuff. Then was regional seneschal for North Oaken most recently, which was an interesting. So when you start out something locally, it's much more hands-on, and there's much more to do on a average day or on a average year. So you have to be responsible for reports. You have to run the meetings. You have to make sure that your other local officers are all filling out their reports, because ultimately the seneschal is the person that everyone comes to when something's not done or something's not right. And then what's interesting about that track is, whereas the local seneschal is very deeply involved with every aspect of your group, as you progress up more towards your baronial and regional positions, there's less, theoretically, there's less paperwork. So, you know, you just have to make sure that everybody below you is doing their reports and filing them on time, and you kind of overseeing issues as they come up. And then I think coming into the Kingdom Seneschal position, it's very similar to being back to the local level. You have to, as Karen once said, mediate between Their Majesties and corporate, and everything kind of falls on your shoulders when something goes wrong. At some point or another, it's all going to come back to the Kingdom Seneschal. So, as I said, I've always been interested in the various organizational aspects of the SCA. So I am not a peer. I don't think that you have to be a peer for most of the Kingdom offices. I would tend to agree with Marcus that something like the Kingdom Earl Marshal or the Rapier Marshal, those are really specific jobs that I think being a peer is beneficial. So.
All right, I had Natalie raise her hand, then we're going to go to Their Royal Majesties. And then we do need to, sorry about that. And then we do need to start moving on. We'll have to table this question as far as whether or not you need to be a peer. We got to get a few more questions going. This is very good. I appreciate everybody's input. That actually is really awesome. But go ahead, Natalie. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Natalie. In the SCA, I'm known as Saruka. I'm actually from the East Kingdom, and I happen to be your ombudsman from the board of directors. So I saw this topic pop up, and I was super excited because I'm on the board of directors. I am not a peer. I'm a firm believer that you do not need to be a peer to do any job in the SCA. There's so many things that go into filling a role, and not everything about that is about the SCA. We can all bring really fantastic talents from outside the SCA into those positions. So yes, you need experience. Yes, you need to be have certain aspects to be able to bring that to whatever position you're looking at. But a lot of that can come from outside the SCA. Before being on the board, I'm not gonna lie, I volunteered for a ton of stuff that I never heard anything back from. And that's really discouraging. So for me, my big message to everyone is please volunteer. If you're interested, you think you can do the job, you think you do a good job, then say, hey, I wanna, and just keep trying. Because did I ever think that I would be on the board of directors? Nope. But it's been a fantastic experience. I've gotten to really work at the top of my skill level. I've gotten to experience a lot of really interesting things, but I've also been able to lend my experience to that group. And I think not being a peer has been helpful in that way. I would also just say that just because you are a peer doesn't mean that your ideas are fantastic. And the same thing goes if you're a non-peer. You know, like we all have really great ideas. We all have maybe not so great ideas. I know I have, but being a peer, being recognized and elevated has really nothing to do with filling a role. And I would even say for Earl Marshal, don't need to be a peer. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Their Royal Majesties would like to speak.
I can't, there we are. Hello, everyone. I would agree with many of the points that we've already seen here. What we're looking at truly is a job that you're wanting to fill. And as we put people into positions on Curia and in those kingdom level, or agree to them to be in kingdom level positions, we are really looking at what knowledge, skills, and abilities you have shown through in your, I think we call it an SCA resume sometimes, to be able to fill the duties of that position. And usually peer is not going to be one of those. I'm going to be looking at what you can do and how you've shown that you can do it. Master Kieradwin's a great example of that. I mean, we got two really good examples of that. As she didn't come up through the ranks as being essential, but very clearly I was not the queen to put her on our curia or put her into that position, but I certainly would have, because she very, very clearly can show that she can do the job in a manner that we need. And then we look at Ilis, who has come up through the ranks, is not a peer, but has come up through and showed her knowledge, skills, and abilities in the role of treasurer very, very succinctly with those roles in the SCA. So realistically, it is not an honorific on your name that is going to get you a position. It is the clear ability that you have to be able to do the position and the ability to communicate your skills in that position. So it would be difficult in some cases. I do believe that it would be hard for people to do a job, but I don't think that they couldn't do the job without having a peerage.
Well, and we even did that with Sarai. I mean, Seto and Inez, when they were king and queen, they left it to us for the most part to decide who was going to fill that role. And in some of the counsel that we received, not necessarily from Curia, but from outside, because you get counsel, is like, well, she's a brand new pair. We should put her in that role. You should put her in that role. Like, well, that's irrelevant. She has the skills to do what we want to have done. Why wouldn't we have her there? So I think that speaks to it. You know, I just wanted to kind of add, you know, I have to remember, you know, specifically for the mid-realm, because this is what we have the knowledge base of, so I'm going to speak to that. Most of our regions are the sizes of other kingdoms, and people don't really realize that. And so our kingdom is unique in the fact that, you know, we have a lot of subcultures within the greater mid-realm culture, and you need to spend time knowing what the culture is. So yes, you can have all these wonderful professional skill sets that can apply and help you be successful, but it does, you know, it can harm you if you don't understand the process there, because the higher you get up as far as a regional or kingdom, if you make mistakes, those mistakes become very evident if you don't have the knowledge base to work from. So it's kind of both sides of the house. You know, you can have professional skills, and those are wonderful, and they're for me, I believe that they're the most important. But on the other side, you do have to have a baseline knowledge in what's going on. Kieradwin talked about, you know, going to all over the place, and so did Sarai. You know, I know Marcus has traveled everywhere as a deputy, and Elsbetto, she's been all over this kingdom forever. And you know, and those are just examples of what you want to do. And it's funny because people say, our dog is over here crowding in on us. I'm like, get away from me. And people usually, it doesn't always happen this way, but more times than not, people will ultimately be recognized as a peer because of the service that they're doing. So don't let that stop you. Just like people said, apply for the job, but put in the work. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to be, you know, the next Kingdom Seneschal. It's like, okay, well, you know, you've been in the SCA for 6 months, and, you know, you don't, you know, you're 20. You don't really have any real life experience yet either. So, but that's how the SCA used to be. So it worked then.
We've grown
and
matured.
A little bit.
Wonderful. All right. So the Kingdom Minister of the Youth would like to speak.
I was just gonna say that for the Kingdom Minister of Youth, it probably is a more unique position in that I don't think anybody who's held the office was a peer or was a peer at the time that they had the office. I'm not sure about in the beginning, but it's definitely one of the ones that more of you're already showing the knowledge and the skills as a youth officer, and then typically you become a deputy and will go up the ranks of it. Or a lot of the times, whoever the Kingdom Minister of Youth is at the time will be working very closely with somebody who is very active and very excited to work with the youth. And so we'll ask them, A lot of the times with this position, we go out and we'll see people who are doing the job already and are very active within their barony or in their region, and just ask them to apply, and they may not have already.
Thank you so much. And let's see here, Sir Stuff, you had some input as well.
Mark has already answered it on the chat. Sorry about that. That's why I lowered my hand.
That's all right. All right, it looks like we do have the Kingdom Earl Marshal here. Looks like Sir Uller. Would you like to speak?
He had to run out to deal with a delivery. He'll be right back.
Not a worry. Okay, it looks like we have someone raising their hand, the Dean of the Page School. Go ahead, please.
There was one Kingdom Minister of Youth who was a deputy or a peer at the time. Technically, she was a royal peer, but that's it. All the rest of us have all been non-peers when we've become the Kingdom Minister of Youth. There's a couple of peers that have been the Dean of Page School. That one seems to be a little bit more, we look for somebody that would be either has served as Kingdom Minister of Youth or who has been active in educating kids within the SCA for a while.
All right, thank you so much. All right, he's still kind of doing something. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm not going in exact order, but this is going to be open to anyone that would like to answer it. How would you advise someone who is wanting the position? We kind of already touched on this. You know, is being a deputy the best method of doing so?
Isla's had her hand up.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Carolyn, go ahead.
Isla's had her hand up first, so let Isla speak first.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Oh, yep, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, that's my fault. I didn't get to speak because I had the 6-year-old, sorry, cartoons weren't working or something. So anyway, to speak to the exchequery specifically, because I think there's a misconception around the kingdom that hopefully, you know, each new officer in any position can kind of get away, is that being an exchequer is scary and nobody can do it. It's probably one of the most transferable in terms of what we do here in our medieval part of our lives and what we do in the real world, right? We all have a checkbook, right? We all have to deal with money. Now, obviously, there's bigger conceptions to that when you're dealing in a volunteer or not-for-profit organization and all of that. And I'm not going to get into that right now. But what I will say is I'm not an accountant. I have been an exchequer for 10 plus years prior to this. I did it at the local level and I did it as a regional. And Maggie O'Donnell spoke to this about a regional position is very different because you're getting to see and organize what's going to go up to kingdom. And that's very, very important for the kingdom officers, because who can organize all of that information in the different regions all the time? So one of the things that I, want to speak to is becoming a deputy, at least in my office, is, I think, really important. I know that some of my previous predecessors had said, I wish I would have gone through the ranks. I wish I would have done it at the local level, at the baronial level, at whatever level it is, just so now, obviously that isn't for everyone, but I will say that groups need exchequers. You have to have an exchequer to have a group work, right? So when you have a revolving door of officers where, oh, well, we need a new exchequer, so the seneschal is going to be the exchequer and the exchequer becomes a seneschal, that doesn't help bolster any, spreading out of the knowledge here. And I think that's where then it gets stymied with what we're trying to do to go up. If you want to move up in kingdom positions or whatever. So the point, that I'm going to try to circle back around to here is that, for a treasurer, everybody thinks that this is super duper scary, and it's not. It is you balancing a checkbook and helping advise your group. And going to your exchequer and saying, hey, do you need a deputy, is super duper helpful. And it's really easy to learn and take over. Being organized is probably the most essential skill, because I'm a preschool teacher. I am not an accountant, but I can handle this even at this kind of larger level because I've got that organizational skill. And Their Majesties spoke to, it's a job. And if you are qualified with organization or whatever they see as the mark of that office, then that puts you in direct line to be a good fit for that office as well. So that's really all I had to say.
Thank you so much. And let's see who I have next here. Looks like I had Katrin going next. She had her hand raised. Go ahead. Oh, lower hand.
There we go.
Oh, there you are.
Just trying to unmute.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm Katrin. I am currently the second deputy to the clerk of precedence. And to answer this question, I think it's vital, especially if you are an introvert or shy and not very good with really speaking for yourself or introducing yourself to people, to go through those ranks. I've been deputy, I've been a baronial officer, I'm a regional officer, I'm the regional chronicler for Constellation, and also a herald. So for me, I needed those baby steps to get me to be more comfortable with dealing with some of the bigger responsibilities. Then I'm a herald. I've been a herald longer than I've been a chronicler, and there are some herald jobs, like some of the submission jobs, that still are very intimidating for me. The clerk of precedence, that's right up my alley, so I have no problem with that. But some of those other positions, or even as regional chronicler, for me to go to like kingdom chronicler, that's very intimidating for me. I'm not sure if I'm anywhere near ready for that. So I think that people like me who are introverts, who are shy, going through those ranks is an excellent way to get experience and to get over that shyness.
All right, thank you so much. All right, I think Carolyn, you had something to add, and then we'll go to Lady Riggett.
So allow me to make a statement. There are two different things. Whether you act as a deputy, anybody that takes over a Kingdom Curia officer must act as a deputy for 6 months. We have it written into the law that way. It's a new law if you missed it, but it's there. So everybody will have a chance to learn and act as a deputy. Nobody will just step in as a high-level Kingdom officer, congratulations, into the swimming pool in the deep end. You will have ways to get you there and to learn and trade. Now, whether to say it is necessary to go through the traditional ranks of being for a year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever, as a first deputy in training, and then first deputy, and then the Kingdom officer, and then the thing, or to be your local, then your regional, and then the thing. I certainly didn't do it that way. I don't think it's necessary, but you should know what you're getting into. Certainly if you have any ideas, if you have a goal of someday, gee, I'd like to be XYZ, then go and talk to the people that held that office, talk to the people that are holding that office. I guarantee you my predecessors have a different view of it than I do, simply because things have changed since then. I had a great conversation with Madare, who was like, yeah, because he wasn't involved when they had the anti-bullying and harassment policy. My predecessor dealt with it when we introduced the idea of the KSMO and all of the rules and requirements that got added in and the job put onto the position. So each one of these things, as we're continuing to learn and grow, gets added. And I know certainly the Kingdom Seneschal position has grown significantly in this time. And I have more deputies than I can count. And I am thankful for each and every one of them, because I certainly can't do all that my job entails without all of the help of my deputies, who help keep me straight and keep me afloat. So, certainly deputies are very vital and important positions, and each person comes to this as they need to learn what they can and cannot do. And if you are more introverted, certainly get a position to start to learn it and see if it's something that you want to do so that you're ready when you step up, because the worst thing that you could do is not be prepared. And especially if it's a high level kingdom office, especially one of the great officers of state, you need to be prepared. You need to know what you're getting into when you step up, because so many people are relying on you to do your job and to do it well, that if you haven't prepared for that, if you're not ready to step into the role because of being an introvert, being shy, or not having the knowledge, it's going to make it more painful, and then it's not going to be as enjoyable. And let's face it, none of us are getting paid the really big bucks for this. And if you are, I'm really jealous, and I need to figure out how to get that, because my paycheck comes in as a great big zero. And I certainly do as much in this job, if not more, than I do in my modern job. So, I do a whole lot of work, and have been doing a whole lot of work. And if you aren't prepared for that, take a good look before you decide to do that. Before you do an application, much like you would any other job, do a little bit of background on it. Do a little bit of interviewing of the people that have held it. Most of us have the battle-worn look faces to prove what we've done and the work that's involved. So we are happy to tell you all about it, the good, the bad, the ugly, but it's all there. And if you're not prepared for that, you're going to have a really sad time, and it's going to kill your love for the SCA, and that's not something that this should do ever. So you want to keep what it is that you love about the SCA. And while there's days that I come home and I'm really saddened because of reports or things that I've had to deal with, on the whole, it's my friends that keep me afloat and keep this going and keep this enjoyable, and why I volunteered to do this job in the first place. So make sure you're considering that.
Thank you so much. All right, and we have Lady Frigate. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wanted to talk specifically about the web minister position. I kind of, prior to when I backed out of the SCA for a little bit to finish up grad school, I did some regional positions. I did web minister for a local group, then web minister for the barony, and then I stepped up as I applied for the Kingdom Web Minister position. And if you're interested in the Kingdom Web Minister position, I will say that the regional positions are nothing like what you'll be doing as Kingdom Web Minister. Just the scope of the position is much larger than any of the lower positions, just because you have the admin access to everything. And that includes a lot of stuff that the regionals don't manage. So I think that, but I do think that coming up through the regional positions has kind of helped me learn what works in the SCA and what doesn't work in the SCA, kind of form some of my philosophies around technology and everything. And I think that that's helped a lot. I think as far as the deputy position, I don't have a deputy that I'm training right now. I have a deputy as a backup, but I don't have someone that I'm actively training. And I do a lot of, I personally like the drop-in cold approach. I do that at work a lot. I do dev swaps, and I just grab work and start working on it. And that's my style. But when I'm mentoring people at work, one of the important things that I try and do is have that conversation with them of how do you want to learn this position, and how do you best learn, and then how can I also be a resource for you to step up. And so my hope is, as I progress in this position, that someday I will be able to get a deputy and have that conversation with them and prepare them for this position, because I know that not everybody can do the drop-in cold and just start messing around. That's me. That's how I like doing things, but it's not for everyone. So I think that conversation is also important.
Thank you so much. All right, their Royal Majesties would like to speak.
Okay, so this is gonna sound real strong, but I'm gonna say this to protect you, okay? We want you to learn these jobs. We want you to be in these roles. Karen kind of touched on it. I'm strongly against the drop-in cold mode. I don't believe in that. But that's my view on the situation. If you can do it, great. Because here's the reality. We've had some people that have been in these kingdom level positions, and as soon as they get in the seat, they're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought it was, and they flame out. We've also had ones that have been unqualified, and the Crown has had to remove them. And you know, you can only work with people so much because, you know, things have to go. And that's not a great situation for the individual to go through that process of flaming out or being removed. And it's certainly not good for the kingdom, and the Crown doesn't enjoy it. So just, you know, spend some time, like Caroline said, you know, do the work. I'm a big believer in learning the job, even if you're asking questions or shadowing someone. I really strongly recommend that.
Yeah, that law was ours. That newer 6 month, having succession planning is really important to us.
Yes.
In my field, it's absolutely vital to ascertain that an organization has someone to come in and do the job adequately. And we believe very strongly that our kingdom should enjoy the very same thing. So certainly for our great officers, we really need someone to be able to step into that role who understands it very, very well. So for great officers, that is a requirement. For the rest of the officers, it is a very strong suggestion for you all out there. Make sure you are planning to have someone trained to come and do your job. These are all really important, or we wouldn't have them. They're vital for the success of our organization and our ability to keep going as an organization. So it became really, really important to understand the things that you will be doing for those jobs. And we feel very strongly that, yes, we have to prepare for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We did have one question in the queue. I want to get to that, and then Zara, we'll be going to you next. Okay. All right. So the question is, let me pull it up. Is there a built-in 6 months for the great officers, or is that the lesser officers also? Anyone would like to field that question?
I believe Their Majesties. I believe Their Majesties answered that, but the answer is yes, it is built into law that for the great officers, and it's highly recommended for any of the deputies to have that 6 months. I mean, I certainly, and just to make it clear, when I stepped in, I did not come in as a regional or the other. I have held other offices, oddly enough, mainly in youth. I was the RUM Chancellor for Youth for several years, and then during SCA 50 year, I ran the entire youth policy. So I'm not administratively opposed, but I had never been a regional seneschal. I'd not been my baronial seneschal. I'd been seneschal a while before, but I still trained for almost a year as 9 months, I think, actually, as the first deputy seneschal in training. So this is not something like just drop in with nothing and sink or swim. But it is now required by law that great officers enjoy at least 6 months as a deputy, making sure they're really ready to do this and that they know what all is involved, because there is so much behind the scenes. You know, as I said, I didn't even list half of what I do as seneschal because of it. Like there's just so many moving parts. So hopefully that clears that up.
Thank you so much. All right. So Zara, you would like to answer? You have some input? Hi.
Hi. So I've got a little bit of a different perspective on this, right? I am a non-peer, but I'm a corporate officer, and this is a new office. So I'm building this office, and the scope is undefined. There was no one to be a deputy to. I mean, we've kind of jokingly tossed around the phrase that we're building the plane while we're flying it. But if you knew how accurate that was, the climate is changing. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a modern resurgence of civil rights. There's a lot going on. And to tie this in, there are kingdom offices for DEI also being established, right? Countess Catherine is our DEI person at the kingdom level. And so while we're creating this office for the SCA, we are simultaneously trying to determine what the kingdom level looks like. So I do want to speak to the idea, right? I'm not a peer. I don't feel like you need to be a peer for basically any job in the SCA. I think that there are times where certainly experience is helpful. But to me, being peer-like is something that everyone can do regardless. They have no real control over the peer part, but they can be peer-like. To that end, trying to work in an office in this capacity where the scope is very large, where things are not defined quite yet, and you're still trying to pin down exactly what it is you do and how you fit into the SCA at large, can be really challenging. And I do think that looking to fellow officers for the scope of the office is really important. I think that making sure that we are breaking out of kind of more entrenched beliefs can be really helpful. And I think that's a skill that sometimes non-peers can bring to the table that peers can't, because they are not part of a larger system that they've familiarized themselves with certain processes and whatnot. They have a different perspective. And I think that perspective can be really helpful when you're trying to address things that are kind of like, okay, well, we've had this problem for a while. What's been working here hasn't worked, so we need a different perspective. We need to look at this from an outside place to maybe see what might work better, what might be more reflective of populist views that we aren't necessarily getting to see by ourselves. So I guess I just kind of want to bring in the idea of that more unique perspective as related to the newer roles, right? DEI is the newest, but certainly social media is a newer role as well that's experiencing a huge boost and boom right now because of COVID-19 and everyone suddenly using that as their primary medium for experiencing the SCA. We do need to get used to looking outside of the box. We do need to get used to approaching things from a perspective we might not have before. And I think people need to feel comfortable getting themselves out of their comfort zone and challenging themselves with roles that they may or may not have felt that they were ready for, if, you know, they are willing to put in the work and look for the support. So that's it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. So it looks like Magister Andreas wants to add to this question.
Sure, and this is going to sound like it's a little divergent, so I'm going to ask everyone to bear with me for a second. There's this thing called unconscious bias, which is the way your brain affects your conscious decision-making process by the way you have been raised, the social experiences that you've had, your schooling. Every experience in your life contributes to your unconscious bias. And our unconscious bias leads us to make certain conclusions about people or situations that we may not recognize consciously that we're doing. For example, if somebody is a knight, then we may unconsciously think that not only are they, not only do they have a lot of prowess, but perhaps we may also think that they're generous, because generosity is a knightly virtue. And so there's a switch in our head that flips because we think about these chivalric virtues in such a way, and we apply them to knighthood. So we may automatically assume that somebody who is a knight is generous. Okay, and I'm trying to use the least charged possible examples that I can, obviously. We may think that because somebody is a peer, they are a leader, which is not necessarily true, right? Leadership is a particular kind of skill that can be learned and can be iteratively improved upon, and not everybody knows how to do that when they become a peer. Or not everybody knows how to do that in all situations when they become a peer. So these unconscious biases lead us to make certain conclusions, and that is going to have an effect, and this is where I can tie this back into the topic, that will have an effect on how existing kingdom officers and royalty view applicants for jobs, right? So yes, I believe that the vast majority of offices in the SCA can be held by non-peers. But when you have a curia made up of mostly peers, or a bod made up of mostly peers, and I wrote about this just the other day. Of the members of the bod, one is not a peer at all. That was Saruku, who was just on, Natalie.
Yeah.
And then another one is a royal peer, but she is not a bestowed peer, right? So she's not a pelican or a knight or a laurel, but she's a duchess, I think. When those people, when you look at your applicants, your unconscious biases are going to turn you in the direction of what's familiar and what your feelings lead you towards, right? The things in the back of your head that say, oh, we need to have somebody who can handle angry knights and royalty. The KEM better be a knight. Or we need to have somebody be the exchequer. It better be a pelican, because pelicans have to, the exchequers have to deal with big money, and our pelicans are supposed to be able to deal with big problems. So I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. What I'm going to say is that there's a lot of big money right now in educating people in the modern world in business about recognizing those unconscious biases and how to make sure that those unconscious biases don't lead them into, I don't want to use the word prejudice because that's a loaded word, but the larger meaning of bias, right? When you're biased against somebody, you don't want your unconscious biases to lead you to a position where you think, for example, that somebody can't do a job just because they don't have a particular set of letters after their name. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. And again, there's no judgment here. Everybody has them. I have them. Maggie has them. Ustad has them. Zara has them. Everybody has them. And we all always need to try and recognize them so that we know why we're making the decisions that we're making, or why we're thinking the things that we do about people on that macro level. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. Now, I think probably a better word instead of prejudice there may be, it's really hard. Like, prejudice does make sense. It really does. We did have one more person asking a question here. Goldweird. Am I saying that correctly, or am I butchering it? I apologize. I'll unmute you.
Sorry, we're hosting our virtual event at the same time, so I had to step away from this. So I've got another computer running with everything else.
I appreciate you showing up.
So let me just give you a quick rundown of where my experience is and things that I've run into. I am not a peer. I have, however, I was the Greater Officer of State Bronze Bureau for the Hospitallers Office. I was the regional hospitaller as well. I was also the Kingdom Historian. I'm currently a Kingdom Officer for the Herald's Office. And also, I'm a Special Projects Deputy for the Society Chatelaine. I've been working on promotional materials, creating some of the new materials because there was issues with not having professional materials out there. And I went into the office having to create these materials because they didn't exist. The previous one had been like 10 years before, 12 years before. But having been an officer, having had to work, seeing it from both sides, from having to work up the chain and down the chain, I was familiar with the office. When I stepped into the Kingdom office, I was basically handed a box and no instructions. And I had to kind of redo a lot of stuff because there was no collective memory to pull from. There was no standardized anything. Everybody tends to reinvent the wheel. One of the things that we need to look at is when we're doing these is making sure that procedures are cataloged, procedures are in place so that the next person knows this is exactly what I have to do, how I have to do it. Those procedures might change, but then that documentation should also change.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Now, I was going to ask a question here to Anyone who hasn't asked any questions. So if you have any questions that haven't been addressed yet, I'd like to hear them. You know, be it peer, non-peer, person holding position or not. There's a very adorable cat behind you. Yeah, so if you have questions, please go ahead and ask. You can start by raising your hand, and then we'll go from there. Anyone? Bueller?
This is Maggie. I'll just say there's some really interesting chatter in the chat box. So if you haven't looked at that, there's some great insights being shared there. So I won't go through and read them all to you, but Hillary brought up a great point about just kind of around networking, making sure no matter, as someone else, as Brigid said, then no matter how you step into a role as a deputy or whatever, make sure you have a group of friends, a group of trusted advisors, people that you can reach out to that can help kind of ground you and provide you with some objective feedback and you can bounce ideas off of. I know I found that really useful. I will be very honest and say that there were a few times in my role that I felt overwhelmed. And like Caradwin, I was a landed baroness and there were times I felt that was very overwhelming. And actually, Ilis and Marcus were also landed barons and baronesses, but we had a Facebook group for all the landeds, and we could go on there and say, guys, oh my gosh, this thing just happened. What should I do? And having those people who had done that job before was really useful. And when I was the Kingdom Media Liaison, I had someone come up to me and say, hey, I did that role a couple people ago, and I just wanted to share this insight with you. This is something that I saw happen, and you might find it useful to hear about this. And we just chatted for a little bit. So not only when you're becoming an officer should you seek out that type of support, but when you're leaving an office or when you've done an office many years ago, feel free to reach out to somebody and say, hey, you know, I used to do what you did, and I just wanted to tell you about this thing that happened. It may never happen to you, but if it did, here's an example of, you know, how you can handle it or something that I did. Feel free to give support. And Caradwin, I'm so happy to turn it over to you.
I just want to say, I cannot stress enough the importance of talking to people who have held the position that you're interested in moving into. It is, I did it before my husband and I both stopped and talked to several people that we knew that were landed baron and baronesses before we ever decided to put ourselves out in that role, because we wanted to know what we were getting into. You know, I certainly did that before I stepped in as to apply for the Kingdom Seneschal position, because especially since I didn't do it through the traditional way of working up through the various ranks, because I wanted to understand and make sure that I knew, and because I was friends with Kat, who was my predecessor, I had seen a lot, but I hadn't seen everything that was behind the curtain. And there is a whole lot. Unfortunately, my position does not have a mid-realm handbook, which I'm trying to fix. Yes, I'm being yelled. I'm working on it. It's my task. We're starting to get to an outline, and hopefully by the time I step down, we will actually have a mid-realm handbook. But you know, I get so much support from some other things. Certainly from my spouse. I could not do this without his help, especially because we do have a school-aged child. With a great pandemic, we're also trying to homeschool in addition to it. So you know, there's a whole lot of work, and mommy gets pulled aside and can't do all the things. So it's important, you know, if you're going to step into the role, you know, that you have a good network, that you have somebody that you can talk to and vent to a little bit on it. I've got a great group through Facebook where I can contact and talk to the other Kingdom Seneschals, and we can, you know, even though our kingdoms aren't the same, and we are the largest kingdom, but it helps to know if they're dealing with something similar. It helps them to know that what we're dealing with. Or when I explain, like, you know, what are you guys talking about? We have 4 events that we could go to in one single weekend, and they're like, yeah, we have 1. Like, there's never an issue. Like, we don't understand this 100 mile rule that you guys are talking about. It's these type of things that are useful. I mean, and then one of the other interesting spots with us being in the Middle Kingdom is not only do I deal with the excitement of the kingdom, but I am on the Penzic Seneschal group, because the Seneschals of the Mid-Realm, of the East, and of Ethelmark are in we have jobs and responsibilities in dealing with PennZic and paperwork to sign off of. And, you know, if you guys really want somebody to hate about PennZic, you guys get to look at me, because we were one, or at least the Seneschal list was one. It ultimately came down to me as Seneschal 1 to make the ultimate decision: are we going to move forward with PennZic or not? Obviously, my fellow 2 PennZic Seneschals could have said, no, we're all for going forward, and they would have outvoted me. But, you know, luckily we'd all discussed and had those conversations before. So part of this job is making those really hard calls that nobody wants to make. And, you know, I know our Crown were very supportive and saying, no, cancel this, shut this down. In fact, I think they begged me to please, this isn't safe, which they didn't have to beg hard because I was already there. But that's, you know, that's part of what this job is making some of those hard calls, making the ones where people are going to be bummed and pissed off at you. And it's rough. So knowing that going into it is highly important. Having good support while you're there is important, you know, to have that, to know that you have these other people that are in the same position and to reach out to them. So never be afraid of that, and never be afraid if you're interested in it and coming up and asking. And we're happy to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's not all roses and sunshine.
Thank you so much. I just want to see if the Kingdom Knights, the Kingdom Earl Marshals are going to be available. It looks like he was doing something. Just want to see if you had any input or insight on what we've been talking about.
Hi,
Yep,
I'm sorry, I stepped out of the room. Was that for me?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any input or insight. I know you got here a little later and you were busy.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Life on a farm never ends, and for you guys it's Saturday. For me, it's another work day. Yeah, you know, I've heard a lot of fantastic comments, and all I can do is really support and echo. I think that as far as the average Kingdom officer for the Middle Kingdom, skills, knowledge, and abilities are tantamount. Whether you're a peer or not doesn't really matter. I know peers who cannot do the job. I know non-peers who can do the job. So finding that right balance. And what I would probably end this with is not saying what it takes to be a Kingdom officer or any of that, but rather, what can you do to get involved? And I talk about the spirit of volunteerism regularly to the marshalate. Every marshal is an officer, a de facto officer of the society, and I guess thereby of the kingdom. We cannot run those activities under the purview of my office without volunteers. Well, that's true of our curia and our kingdom officers too. We simply cannot have officers if we don't have volunteers. I have watched over the last few years as we've had fewer and fewer applicants for various offices, up to and including to the point that kingdom officers have to go out and find potential replacements, which is cool because you can vet them a little bit. But that does kind of speak to me that maybe we're not encouraging our newer people or our, I don't know, non-peers, our local players to not become more involved. And so I want to really echo this outward that we cannot have our game if we do not have volunteers. So if anyone's sitting at home right now and they're thinking, gosh, I wish I could go to an event or be more involved, let me tell you, you can be involved right now. Reach out to your local or your regional officer or your kingdom level officer or those deputies and ask if there's anything that you can do. And the more involved you get, the more you see how the sausage is made, as it were, and you can make decisions if you want to become more involved and learn more. And the more you learn, the more appropriate you yourself will be for a given office. It's certainly hard to step into a kingdom office or a regional office and not have any idea what's going on. I think that would be like a horror show. That would be like one of those nightmares where you run naked into a classroom ready to take a test that you haven't studied for, kind of thing, right? That's horrible, right? So for anyone listening, if you think you want to be a kingdom officer, you can certainly begin training for that anytime.
Okay.
Also, keep in mind that just as Their Majesties said, just because you're not a peer doesn't mean you're not qualified for an office, but just because you're a CEO of an international company, that doesn't mean you are qualified for a kingdom level office. It's kind of a balance of knowing exactly what that office's requirements are, how to deal with us, the volunteers, because let's face it, of all the people that are on this call, if all of us walk into your office angry, you're going to have a really hard afternoon of trying to get all of these disparate personalities calmed down or built back up or whatever the issue is. And you're going to have to do that, all within the context and purview of your office. And you'll learn that by doing. So my big encouragement coming out of this is, if you want to do the job, go find a way to do the job.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point. I really do. Let's see. I think we have a question coming up in the chat here. Okay. All right. Well, we're actually going to be getting towards the end here. So unless someone else has a question, I am going to defer to their Royal Majesties. Does anyone else have any questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Blah, blah, blah.
Marshall, or Rashid, I'm sorry. This is Maggie. I just wanted to say that I think that it's important when you are considering doing an office that you're not just, I'm going to apply for all these offices and see which one will take me on. I did that in my real life job. I applied for everything and I I got hired obviously and found the thing, and I've been doing it for 23 years now, but for a while there I was just applying for everything. So like, listen to your own heart, your own mind about what interests you, and look into that, and maybe take on a couple different deputyships to find out which one of those things might be the best fit. But if you're applying for everything just to get a job, that's not the way to go. Make sure that you're really looking at things that interest you, that you think would be cool, that you think would be a neat way to help and give back, and don't just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, anyone else? Okay, well, I defer to the Royal Majesties. Go, your Royal Majesties, take us home.
We so appreciate you moderating it and bringing these topics forward, because as you said, it is a passion of ours. We really want good people filling in those roles and being prepared to do so. So thank you so much. Thank you all for attending so that you have a better understanding. And for all those who have given us your words of wisdom today, we really, truly appreciate that today in your time. The gift of your time, not only today, but in our organization, is so appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so with that said, I will go ahead and end this discussion. I want to thank everyone for showing up. I know this is your Saturday. You took a couple hours out of your day to listen to my bad jokes and look at my face and see everyone else. So for that, I applaud you. So with that said, Maggie, go ahead and end the recording.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.